Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It is Gamecube Gaming. Today we're talking about the big yellow man himself, Wario. The Wario franchise has always been Nintendo's scapegoat to get weird with the Mario IP, I feel. If it wasn't all the way back to games like Wario Land that were standing out against the regular 2D platformers of the time, all we have to really do is take a look at the WarioWare series to see how out there this character has gotten. Wario is usually not tied down to the design restrictions, say like a 2D Mario platformer has in terms of formatting levels, keeping consistent enemy designs, and keeping things within the realm of possibility in that universe. You know, obviously it's a bunch of plumbers running around, but for some reason it still feels kind of restrictive of what can be there. However, when it comes to Wario, for some reason Nintendo really just said like, hey man, whatever works with this guy, we gotta make him work. This is a big motherfucker, he's taking up a lot of space. This has spawned some of the best franchises out there, but there's one Wario game that has always lied in the wake, waiting for people to come on by and take a little peek. Many have mostly forgotten about this game, but it holds a pretty special place in my childhood, and I played it a ton as a kid. Let's take you back, alright? The year is 2002, and the Gamecube just came out late last year across the world to decent reception. You got a couple games here and there to play, you know, capture some ghosts, maybe hit the waves. The Gamecube didn't launch with a mainline Mario game, and with that being slated for a summer release of 2002, it was up to the other Mario protagonists to take the spotlight, mainly being Luigi and Luigi's Mansion. Wario was also getting his opportunity at the main 3D platformer stage, as at E3 2002, the first iteration of a game known as Wario World was shown. It was a very early beta of the game, as there are some major differences from that beta to the final game, but one thing was very clear: the game seemed pretty promising. The game wouldn't end up being released until a full year later, with many changes from its first appearance, but upon its release, many Mario fans were ready to see what Wario had to offer in this weird treasure hunt. If I remember one thing from my time with the game, especially when I was a kid, it's that the game's insanely strange. I'm not talking like WarioWare strange either, where it comes off as maybe charming and quirky, but I got this overall feeling of uneasiness and dread when playing this game as a kid. That's what I kind of want to focus on with this video today, really, is to expose Wario World as the horror game it is. So think of this as a pseudo-retrospective, but focusing on what made this game stand out a little bit in this strangeness. I want to take the time to go back through the game and see if it was as strange as I once had remembered. So without further ado, in my opinion, this is Nintendo's strangest GameCube game, Wario World. The game doesn't give a whole lot of setup to the story, so it's up to the player using context clues and the gaps being filled in by the game's manual for us to get the full picture of what this game's story is really about. The game's plot is after years of collecting a lot of jewels and treasures along Wario's many adventures, he's finally posted up in his castle relaxing. The ludicrous amount of greed oozing from Wario in his castle ends up being its own demise, actually, as one of the treasures Wario picked up along the way it ended up being cursed. The black jewel was an ill-fated gem that was used to curse a whole species once before, but was locked away, killing its evil power. That was until Wario came along and took it for himself, releasing the black jewel from its curse, and it ends up waking up. Good on you, War. It ends up destroying Wario's entire castle and transforms the many treasures around the treasure room into monsters Wario will have to fight throughout the game. I think this is a pretty important detail the game kind of not glosses over, but doesn't explain fully. The somewhat of origins of all these unique and strange bosses that are present throughout the game. These are really the source of the strangeness for me in the game, so knowing their origin came from the Black Jewel, transforming them from some of the treasures Wario had collected along the way, is pretty interesting. Listen, I want to know what piece of fucked up treasure Clown Around came from, because you need to destroy that thing immediately. After this, Wario is whisked away to another world that is filled with 4 worlds and a hub world. Each world has 2 levels and a boss, which led to a very short playtime the game offers. Each level takes maybe 30 minutes to an hour to 100% complete, and being that there's only 8 real levels, the game ends up flying by. This was a large criticism of the game when it was released, but we'll talk about the game's reception at the end of the video. With that, Wario's adventure begins and he's off to World 1, Excitement Central. Excitement Central is the first world in Wario World and houses 2 levels known as Greenhorn Forest and Greenhorn Ruins. These levels serve as the basic tutorial for the game, teaching players many of Wario's basic movements. These are learned from saving the spritlings in the game, of which there are 5 in each level. Upon entering the Excitement Central, you will enter the first level, Greenhorn Forest, which is just the ultimate first level of a video game. Like many other tutorial levels, Greenhorn Forest is pretty simple and can be completed in no time at all. The level does a pretty good job of introducing a lot of the stranger ideas ideas to the player through the level, like the garlic dispenser refilling your health, the ending statue requiring a certain amount of gems to fight the boss, and the importance of collecting the golden statues for health upgrades. Don't forget Wario's big juicy cheeks. You'll need those for a half a heart at the end. In this level, we are introduced to the basic enemy set in the game, of which in the first world they resemble dinosaurs. These enemies will change visually depending on which world and level you're in, but for the first world, they all look like, I don't know, some botched dino nuggets or something. Upon finishing the level, you'll come across Green Fist, the first boss of the game. Green Fist is like any other first boss and can be taken down with relative ease. He's a bit challenging if you aren't good at running away from him, but this is a good boss battle to introduce the player to how bosses work in the game. Each boss has its own health bar, and it usually involves Wario knocking out the boss before he's able to do a finisher move a la WWE. Overall, in the game, as far as strangeness goes, like I mentioned, I think the bosses are the biggest source of this, but for Green Fist, there isn't much off about him, at least for me. He kind of just looks like a great value Koopa from Mario or some strange grass-type Pokemon or something. After defeating Green Fist, the player moves on to Greenhorn Ruins, which gets a bit more expressive and out there than Greenhorn Forest did. The game is now getting a bit more challenging, but nothing that isn't simple for the first world. This level features the same base enemies as the first level, but also features uniquely strange enemies like Old Red Mug here, who is a character that is used to cross over chasms, and basically looks like a Womp from Mario, but instead of sporting this ugly-ass expression, these guys have these strange red protruding faces Wario has to punch. These guys weren't doing anything, man. What is this, the knockout challenge? This gets into something I noticed with my time in the game, and that's that a lot of things in the game that you wouldn't expect to have a face, they end up having a face. Obviously, your everyday enemies have faces, and Wario has a face. A very expressive one, I might add. But inanimate things you wouldn't think would need a face end up having one in this game. Things like bombs, the statue the red diamonds sit on, and even the spring Wario stomps on to lead the bonus areas. Obviously, this isn't the creepiest thing or anything, but something about it unnerves me slightly. Especially the bomb, I don't know, it looks like some creepy moon emoji or something. I just get the feeling a lot of things are looking at me when I don't even realize. Even the garlic dispenser is a little uncanny, obviously, right, because he's a huge living garlic man, but something about his face is a little strange to me too. Not to mention he's kind of a dick, charging Wario interest for each subsequent garlic he buys. If we do break it down though, I guess he is taking a couple nasty hits from Wario, but still, come on man, you're gonna bankrupt my boy here. Greenhorn Ruins also introduces mini bosses into the game, which are known as these crystal entities. These show up throughout most of the levels as the default mini boss if the level doesn't have its own unique mini bosses. The crystal entities are these large crystal structure-like creatures with a robotic body on top, controlling a small group of enemies, and have 3 hits. These serve as a roadblock in the level, as you can't leave the area until you defeat the entity due to this large force field it creates. There are a lot of instances of these roadblocks in the game, as you are constantly being stopped to fight stuff without the ability to move on. For example, this level also introduces the fight arena, which reminds me of the battle arenas from Donkey Kong 64, but the basic idea is you have a minute to see how many baddies you can royally rumble. The idea is fun at first, but it gets reused to death, and by the end of the game, you're really just dodging enemies and waiting for the time to go down because you're fighting sleep from being so goddamn bored. Regardless, coming up at the end of Greenhorn Ruins, you will end up fighting the boss known as the Sandworm. The Sandworm is also pretty simple and easy to fight. He is a bit more involved than Green Fist as he has a slew of attacks, but considering his best attack can be dodged by literally standing on the side of the stage, I mean, this guy isn't a threat at all. Kind of a major oversight. Since I don't have much more to say about the Sandworm, I'd like to praise Wario World for its boss battles, as in most cases in video games, you don't actually get to fight the boss. I feel like in many games, especially today, you don't get to actually get your hands on the boss, whether it's a stylized boss battle where you're not directly fighting the boss themselves, or at worst, the boss dies in a cutscene or some dumb shit before there's even a battle that can take place. But in Wario World, you actually get to get in the boss's faces and beat them up. There's something just really satisfying about that, and I feel like it's one of the best parts of Wario World in my opinion. It gives me the same satisfaction as beating up one of the mini bosses from Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, where each beat lands a punch on the boss. There's something about punching the boss over shooting him down in a giant mech that feels way more satisfying to me personally, but that might just be me. Anyway, with Greenhorn Ruins out of the way, we move on to the first world's boss. Each world has its own unique world boss that acts as its own stage. These are usually a bit harder and more involved than the stage bosses, but still they are definitely the shortest part of the game. Regardless, these boss rooms serve as the world boss, and the first boss is known as Dynamite. The design of this boss is strange to say the least. It is of a giant lizard, maybe a gecko if I had to guess, but I assume this is just meant to resemble a generic dinosaur, being that its name is Dino-Mighty. The boss is sporting large blonde hair with a red leather two-piece lingerie set. What the hell were they thinking with this design? I don't know. I guess they added a giant lizard and it wasn't impactful enough, so they threw on all this risque gear. Regardless of how hard or not hard it is to look at, maybe it's like a car crash, I can't fucking look away. The boss battle itself is definitely more involved than the previous, but it's still pretty simple. Like other bosses, you can beat Dino-Mighty up, but if you really want to knock it out, you'll have to stick to its tail and ground pound it from above. From here, you can do one of the few Wario finisher moves on the boss. My favorite is the spin move, specifically on this boss too, because Wario just straight up grabs this thing's tank to grip onto it and spin it around. Yeah, you thought Mario was wild grabbing fucking Bowser's tail in Mario 64, huh? The boss room is surrounded by lava and these strange statues that line the walls, and all of this gives off this dread-like feeling that you're about to face off against something huge. And you do. The game cuts to the actual boss, and it kind of offsets this dread with a strange feeling. The boss battle is as crazy and bombastic as, say, a Donkey Kong 64 boss battle, but for some reason, the strange design of the boss almost grounds this one a bit from being too intimidating anyway. I think devs were definitely going for bigger, intimidating bosses here, specifically with Dino-Mighty too, as when you first start the battle, you're shown just how small Wario is compared to this thing. After defeating the creature, the battle ends like other battles would up until this point, but Wario gets one of the 4 keys he needs to unlock the final part of the game. With this, the second world opens up and the player is already a fourth of the way through the game. I'm telling you, this was a short one, fellas. Spooktastic World is way more unique in its level designs than Excitement Central. This area is supposed to act like the spooky part of the game, and if it's not apparent from the surrounding level select part of the world, then it's going to be the level themes themselves that really sell the theme of this world. The first level in the world is appropriately titled Horror Manor, and it starts with Wario being sent to a graveyard of sorts and is almost immediately met with a new enemy slash mini boss known as Big Bone Fist. This bony fist will attack Wario with a few moves, but overall it can be easily avoided, and after ground pounding it 3 times, you can move on. As you move throughout the level, you'll start entering the bonus areas, and this is where you realize that not only are the enemies different throughout each world, but the bonus rooms are also unique in design to the surrounding levels. This one features similar sky bonus rooms to the first few stages, but instead of the skybox is now cloudy and dark, and this adds an extra layer of atmosphere to the level as you realize, oh, I'm not even safe in the bonus levels either, as these usually serve for me as a quick reprieve from the rest of the strangeness in the game anyway. I don't know, I thought it was worth mentioning since the bonus rooms legitimately make me feel content with life, at least in their atmosphere. Some of these bonus rooms are bullshit as fuck in terms of gameplay. Continuing through the level, you'll finally come across this horrific manor we've all been hearing so much about. Rolling up to the manor, you'll find the lock itself as an enemy you have to defeat in order to enter, and I gotta say, this has gotta be the scariest Ring doorbell video that would ever exist. Upon entering the mansion, it acts as any other spooky mansion in these types of games, but to me the mansion feels weirdly claustrophobic. I'm unsure if this is just because the other levels in the game are usually more open and even outside, but to me the mansion feels very cramped. It also doesn't help that you don't have a lot of room in this hoe to dodge enemies, so this is usually a big choke point for me in the game. Luckily, you're not inside the mansion for very long as you get dropped into a factory that is present underneath the manor. This factory portion acts as the final part of the level and actually introduces some challenging sections with electricity traps that really start testing the player's patience. The factory segment concludes when you enter the boss room of the boss known as Brawl Doll. Brawl Doll is definitely up in the A or S tier for creepiest boss battles in the game, especially if you have a fear of these little creepy baby dolls. Brawl Doll is, after all, a giant baby doll that has come to life and started attacking Wario randomly. I've had many people mention in my comments of previous videos how much Luigi's Mansion's first boss, Chauncey, scared them a lot when they were kids, but to me this is a much more disturbing example of that boss in action. Much like Chauncey, the Brawl Doll has similar attacks where it will fly up in the air and attack with projectiles and random patterns. However, unlike Chauncey, you can beat the actual shit out of this doll when it comes down and gets on the player's level. It's definitely not the hardest boss, but it's an evolution of difficulty just due to the fact it's harder to reach the doll since it's flying in the air. It's about a similar difficulty leap from when Boom Boom got wings in Super Mario Bros. 3. If you have a fear of creepy dolls, then this is definitely one of the scariest enemies or bosses in the game for you, but for me, there are stranger and more out there bosses we're going to cover that kind of disturb me a little bit more. Although I will give Brawl Doll this, it was one of the first bosses that made me realize that the game might not be all that we were expecting it to be. The second level, Spooky Circus, introduces players to another very common fear, and that's the fear of clowns and maybe even the circus itself. The spooky circus begins with Wario being swarmed by small miniature clowns like we just loaded up No Mercy or some shit. This sets the scene of this bombastic and crazy level the second you load in, and it proves that Spooky Circus might be one of the best levels in the game. To me, it feels like this level and maybe like Shivering Mountain or something had the most development time. This is just due to how many evolutions this level takes throughout, all while being grounded in a circus theme. You know, you'll be high up in the sky balancing on precarious platforms like you're Joseph Gordon-Levitt in that one movie. You're bowling with bombs against big-ass, pink-ass snakes, and even running from these giant elephants with these little dudes on their backs. What's up, little dude? The whole level is pretty precarious as there are a lot of opportunities to fall off in which you will end up sending Wario to the Unithorn's lair. The Unithorn was brought up in level 1 from one of the spritelings you save in that stage, and while you're able to visit the lair in that level, this is where the lair becomes more of a threat in my opinion. All it will take is a bad mistimed jump to send Wario careening into the Unithorn's lair. Once down there, Wario must run from these giant disembodied rhino heads that will chase Wario around the room and attempt to grab and shake the coins out of him. Not only that, but the surrounding water in the room will also cost player their hard-earned money. The only way out is to find the random box with the spring in it, and this requires checking a lot of boxes with bombs in them. And you get this lovely sound effect every time you're wrong too. It just really doesn't get on your nerves the 50th time you hear it. I remember dreading falling in this game as a kid because I was always terrified of the Unithorns, even though I knew they couldn't really harm the player other than taking their coins. I think this was just a combination of the hectic music down there along with the want to get out of there quickly. It really shook an 8-year-old me to my core. After the creepy effect of the Unithorns wears off though, these guys become easily the most annoying part of the game, especially late game. It only becomes easier to fall off in the later levels, and every time being at a random amount of time you'll be down there, it gets pretty annoying pretty quickly. I would much rather there had been a life system and Wario just dies like every other 3D platformer there is, but instead they made Wario go to hell to fight the spirits of the rhinos Mario killed in Super Mario World. Once you make it back out of the Unithorn's lair, it's back to business up top, but I really wouldn't blame you if you lost your footing because chances are you didn't get lucky enough to not be in the lair for more than 30 seconds. Not only does the Spooky Circus feature clowns, but they also feature creepy enemies like these eerie caged beasts. These are actually just lions that are caged and to be used later in an act or something, but the enemy itself is just the cage with lion's arms and legs sticking out. Not only that, but you can see the glowing eyes of the beast peering at you from inside the cage. This enemy used to scare me a lot when I played as a kid, especially when I didn't know it was a lion and I was just peering at the cage from far and 2 yellow eyes darted back at me. Even after finding out it's a lion, there's still a sense of fear because, well, it's a fucking lion. After Wario spends a horrific day at the circus, it's now time for him to face off with the main act. You could actually see a picture of the boss of the circus earlier in the level. This was a foreshadowing to the boss known as Clown Around. This boss, in my opinion, is way creepier than Brawl Doll and might even be one of the most unnerving bosses in the game. For starters, the area you fight Clown Around in is a sensory overload. There's so many colors and things going on in the background, I might just fucking vomit. The boss battle itself takes the difficulty to a whole other level, as this boss is heavily a gimmick fight. Don't worry though, you still get to beat the absolute shit out of this dude too. His main attack sees him tightrope walking across 2 platforms on a large ball in which the player can hold on to in order to get to the other platform. Anytime Clown Around leaves the platform, you want to hop onto his ball with him, as if you don't, he throws a huge bomb to the other platform, destroying the player if they're over there. Once he's thrown it, he will then begin to rip off his own head and throw it at the player. Yeah guys, that wasn't just conjecture before, this guy is actually really fucked up. It doesn't just stop at one head either, as this guy has many heads he'll keep spawning and throwing at Wario until he's defeated. Perhaps the scariest thing is when he takes off one of these heads to throw at Wario, it reveals his real head, or I guess just his face, since it can only be seen by looking down into Clown Around's body. I don't even know how to describe his face. It's just messed up, man. It's just so uncanny. As the boss battle continues, the more heads Clown Around can throw, and it gets to a point where they become a bigger threat than the boss itself, honestly. Look at how many fellows are around me right now. It's also just kind of a gross feeling having a bunch of disembodied heads surrounding you, so much that you can't even move. I'm knee-high in some disembodied heads right now. And I get these probably aren't real heads and just stuffed or something, but try and telling a kid that, huh? I thought homie was constantly decapitating himself, and he had some weird Voldemort deal going on underneath his head. Not only does he keep producing more and more heads, but the opportunity to jump on his ball when he's moving across platforms becomes much harder. So this boss battle, I feel, is the first one that actually feels somewhat challenging and may stump some people. If not for the difficulty, it'll be the sheer shock of what's actually going on the screen that'll make people choke this boss battle out. Regardless, after you whip Clown around's ass, it's time to move on to World 2's boss, known as Dual Dragon. The Dual Dragon is a large oblong creature that's basically a fucked up version of Cat Dog from the show Cat Dog, but giant creepy looking dragons instead. Dual Dragon Dog. Stupid, it's stupid. You can fight the dragons head on, but quickly come to find out it only knocks them out for a brief moment and doesn't take away any health. You actually have to wait until the other dragon is about to do his flame move, and then you knock out the dragon on the other side so he gets hit with the other's attack. So you're basically using the boss to kill the boss, which I always thought was a super cool and inventive way to make a boss battle. Looking back, the basic design of these guys unnerved me, similar to how something like Unagi from Super Mario 64 would, but today these guys are kind of just a cool boss battle to me, with an over-exaggerated dragon design that I find unique nowadays, but back then the drugged out eyes really unnerved me. These guys either got hit with the nastiest flashbang right before the fight, or they haven't slept in a couple decades. Regardless, maybe they should have rested up, because you can easily beat these guys' asses after finding out what their gimmick is. With these fellers out of the way, it's on the World 3, Thrillsville. Thrillsville to me sounds like it might have been a better title for the last world, but this world continues into more difficult levels. Since this is already the halfway point of the game, we can expect these levels will become a bit more involved, but nothing can prepare the player for Shivering Mountain. Shivering Mountain is the first level in the third world and is by far, to me, the most annoying level in the game, at least if you're going for all the collectibles in the level, as many of them are missable, being located at the top of mountains or midway down where you need to slide down at Mach speeds, but you have no idea where the collectible is on the mountain until your fourth time down, which requires the player to run back through the level every fucking time they miss it. Not to mention the game has segments where you ground pound a brick that will sometimes send you into a small bonus room you can make it out of, but other times it will take you to the next part of the level without warning, and usually it's a large drop so you can't make it back up without starting the level over. Hey man, I still had stuff back up there to collect. Alright, I digress on my bitching. The name of this level lives up to level 2, as you're pretty much walking on the side of a large cliff overlooking, well, for Wario it's the Unicorn's lair, but for others it's probably like a nice Christmas small Swedish town theme or something nice like that down there. Throughout the level you'll run into some more uniquely designed enemies here, like the sled creature, which doesn't harm Wario but can knock him off the mountain, and we all know how annoying that is. This makes these guys pretty annoying, but unlike enemies later in the game who do a similar movement, these guys are pretty easily dodged. They're moving a little bit slow down this mountain. This kind of goes back to the everything has a face in the game thing I mentioned too, as these guys are supposed to be sleds but don this strange bird-like face on the fronts of them. This was perhaps to make them more noticeable as an enemy instead of something the player might want to interact with, but the design nonetheless is a bit strange to me. As you move into the level, you'll enter a segment that takes place underground in an ice cave. This is where the player meets some of the more unique enemies in the level, like the Icicle Mites and Faddingtons. Rich coming from you, Wario. The Icicle Mite is actually a little creepy to me, as it's just a large icicle running at Wario. Okay, maybe not creepy, but there's something about how simple the enemy is in its design that's a little bit off-putting for me. Faddington is also introduced here, wherein he is a large fat enemy made up of what appears to be ice cream. If you have lactose intolerance, fucking run. This guy is actually a really cool enemy design, but what they can do to the player makes me hate them to my fucking core. These guys will be sending you to the Unicorn's lair more times than I sent Yoshi careening to his death anytime that's an option in a Mario game. If it gives me that little extra boost, I'm taking it. The only way to get by these guys is either by jumping over them or knocking them out, which just takes way too long, so I usually find a way around them or jump over them. The mini boss in Shivering Mountain is known as the Angler Mangler, and you'll run into a few of these throughout the level. The creature is a giant fish that resembles an angler fish but out of water and in the snow, obviously. This introduces a new game mechanic of sorts, as well as Wario can now ground pound these specific enemies, which will then shoot a small projectile upwards. This is the main attack against the Mangler, as you can't fight them like you would any other enemy in the game. Once they're dealt with, it's high time to pay the boss of the level a visit. I've actually talked about the Winter Winster, the boss of Shivering Mountain, in another video about creepy things and family-friendly games, and that's what actually spawned the idea for this standalone standalone video. So thanks for everyone who commented that they'd like to see this video you're watching right now in that video. So shout out to all you guys, appreciate it. Anyway, in that video I said Winter Winster is probably the most disturbing boss in Wario World, and while I'm not retracting my statement, I think there are some other bosses that might give the Winster a run for its money. Mainly the aforementioned Clown Around and Red Brief J, which we'll be talking about him later on. Whew! The Winter Winster is one of the strangest and eerie designs of bosses we've seen up to this point. This guy is basically a large, fully grown blue head on a tiny floating body that's just, what the fuck is this? Even the introduction of the creature is creepy. They knew what they were doing with this guy, alright? The boss battle is actually pretty involved too, as you have to knock the Winster out of the air to hit him. Unlike the Brawl Doll though, this is much harder to do as you'll need to hit him with the lava that spews from these craters after adding this rock to them that the Winster drops. Only then he'll become knocked out for Wario to pick up and really do some damage. The Winster comes packing with a lot of moves, including one where he gets these large glowing Medusa red eyes, and if Wario looks at him while he's doing this, it will shoot a laser-like thing into Wario, inflating him, making him even fatter than he is now. I didn't think that was possible. Someone in the video where I talked about this commented that this was the developers trying to hide a fetish, and man, I gotta agree, this is some freaky shit, man. Nah, but the boss battle overall is very creepy, with the surrounding stage and atmosphere seeming off-putting, not to mention the shriek the Winter Winster makes anytime it's hurt in the battle. When most people make the statement that Wario World is a weird game, they can point to the Winter Winster, and usually the argument is ended right there. The other person is just like, "How? I totally get it. What you mean, man? Sorry I ever doubted you. I get it." After defeating the Winter Wind Waker, it's off the Stalk Way. If I can't be anything else, I'm gonna be honest. Stalk Way is one of the most forgettable levels in this game for me, all the way down to the boss. I don't think it's necessarily a bad level, and it introduces some new things to the game, but overall it feels a little generic and somehow doesn't stand out from the first world levels all that much to me. With a killer theme like the Shivering Mountain had, this level just seems to be another grass or forest variant level like the first world. I would have rather seen a world that took place in a volcanic mountain or something, especially considering the theming of the overall World 3 boss. I might be alone in feeling this way, but Stalk Way feels a little stale to me. Maybe by this point the game's repetitive gameplay catches up with the player, but I'm not a huge fan of this level. One of my least favorite things about this level is the constant need to be spinning on these platforms with an enemy. And yeah, once or twice throughout the game it's a cool gimmick, no need to call Ma, no need to call home, no need to write home even. But when this level alone houses 8 of these things, you can see why I fucking hate it. You need to go for a big enemy, which you gotta wait for it to be spawned, pick him up, knock him out, pick him up, start the archaic spinning move up, then and only then you can move up this platform. It's a very tedious process, and I swear one time through my playthrough capturing footage for this video, I swear I did everything right and the platform just didn't move. It didn't rise. It just didn't feel like it, I guess.
Nah, I don't really feel like it.
Not to mention there are 2 separate battle arenas, and some of the treasures are just super out of the way. Like, I'm pretty sure I was supposed to grab this golden treasure right here that's floating in the sky on the way down here, but I missed it, and I was being stubborn, so I attempted this trick shot like 20 times in a row, and it finally landed. But man, if this wasn't adding to my disdain for the level, holy shit. The level introduces a new mid-boss known as the Tree Freak, and to be honest, by the end of this, I was calling him the Tree Fuck, because I was done with him, because this guy is by far the most annoying of the gate midway bosses. This is because the main attack you can use against this tree is to pick up the nuts it drops in front of Wario, but to ensure you don't get hurt, you have to ground pound in front of them to move them into a position in which Wario can safely pick them up. Problem is, these nuts move around more than a ragdoll in Gmod, so it's incredibly frustrating to even get 3 shots off to kill this thing. Not to mention, if you're not fast enough, you'll have to reopen its leaf shield thing so you can actually hit it. Also, everything and anything will move these fucking nuts, man. That includes other nuts, other enemies, and Wario himself. Get hit by one nut, you're knocking around the other 5 around the stage. There, a couple are in the beginning. You got a couple in the boss room. It's so fucking annoying, this guy. Anyway, the level also introduces a semi-annoying mechanic the game uses a bit more later in the game. This is the magnet enemies and the ability to use them as platforms after they've been knocked out. This is actually a really cool game mechanic and idea, but due to how it was executed, it's just another annoying thing to add to this level. I'll say this though, it's nowhere as annoying as when it returns in Pecan Sands, which is the same idea but with shovels. Fuck that part. The main issue is the spawn rate of these guys is set to fucking 1,000 or something, because they always want to make sure there's a few enemies there that the player can use to cross the gaps. Problem is, the second you knock out one of these guys, 3 more spawn in and start attacking Wario. And if Wario is holding an enemy while being attacked, he'll drop it. This is just a fucking headache at this point. This level is just chock full of cool ideas that were executed pretty badly and is so repetitive by the end. The boss of Stalk Way is also just as bland as the level itself, as it's just a giant spider you have to fight. I get it. There's another fear, right? I know people have spider fears, but I don't really see anyone getting off-put by this guy, to be honest. Rather, I could see someone being maybe unnerved by the giant spider boss in Donkey Kong Country 3, but this guy looks too cartoony to be too dodgy for me. The boss battle is pretty simple, as it takes place in a large circle where you can dodge the spider's attacks before he spits out these sticky globes Wario can climb on. After grabbing one, you have to time your jump from when the spider sucks back in the orb, and depending on which one you're on depends the speed at which he sucks you in. This part is fairly easy though, as there is a pretty big window to jump off and ground pound his back. Also, by the way, this whole conversation is on pause. Pause to all that, alright? I'm blowing out a spider's back and shit? What am I talking about? The boss battle is surprisingly simple and easy compared to something like the Winter Winster, and with that, it's off to fight the infamous World 3 boss, Red Brief J. Red Brief J is probably the most confusing boss when looking from afar at Wario World. There really is no expecting this after all, unless you read the manual, of which he's one of the few boss characters actually mentioned there, but otherwise the guy kind of clotheslines the player with weirdness. I don't know if it's just by his design or something, but this guy is so off-putting, and not even in a creepy way, like more like appears on the nightly news kind of way, you know? I mean, the guy is rocking a Speedo with a huge fucking piece. I mean, like, this guy's got some girth on it, I'm gonna be honest. No shame in rocking what you got, right? Unless what you got is presented in an E-rated game for kids. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think my parents would have liked seeing a big bull cock on my video game screen when I was playing as a kid, but regardless, this boss isn't just strange because he's sporting some serious meat. He's also one of the few bosses you can't touch once. Not that you'd want to, but you know what I mean. You can't punch the guy. The only way to get this guy to die is to trick him into nearly falling off into the lava, then ground pounding the stage, sending him into said lava. Overall, Jay is one of the tougher bosses, as it gets pretty intense when he gets closer to losing. He'll start dashing across the stage at mock speeds, and it can be pretty difficult to end up dodging him. With a large, disturbing looking bull cow creature that you can't attack and is stalking you on the middle of a platform in the middle of a fucking volcano, it makes for a pretty unnerving boss battle. Luckily though, if you're able to outwit the big red brief Jason, then it's on to the next and final world, Sparkle Land. Sparkle Land, being the last world in the game, houses some of the toughest levels on Wario's adventure thus far, but they are also some of my favorite levels in the game. Well, at least Pecan Sands anyway. However, let's start with the first level, Mirror Mansion. Mirror Mansion is easily the creepiest level by design choice, I think, and purposely made to be this. It's not just because I have a pretty big fear of mirrors either, as the level's enemies and designs make for a pretty uneasy time. Not only are the unique enemies in this level a bit creepy, but the redesigns for some of the normal basic enemies are even off-putting in this level. Take, for example, the masked clubber, who takes the position of the Triceratops enemy in the first level. This guy now has a large baseball bat and a Jason Voorhees ski mask. I don't know if you guys have it where you live, but whereabouts around me, people sometimes put the ski mask up in their dash or hang it around the passenger's headrest to make it look like someone is constantly in the car with them. Anytime I see that, whether I'm driving or walking, doesn't matter what time of day, it sends a goddamn chill down my spine through to my asshole, and I'm 100% sure that it's a Jason wannabe and I'm his next victim. This guy kind of reminds me of those many times that happened in my life, so I'm not about these fools, alright? The Triceratops enemy wasn't the only one to get a creepy redesign, as the pterodactyl enemies also appear pretty uncanny in this level as well. This enemy is known as a hypo and is a large bird-like creature with a large sack tied around its head with an eye and mouth holes. It's kind of creepy considering most of the other bird designs in the game have a beak, and seeing as this doesn't seem to have one present underneath the mask, it alarms me to know what their faces might look like underneath. Nonetheless, these enemies work like any other standard enemies in the game, so the player is mostly used to them by now and can be taken down pretty easily. What about the unique enemies in the game, Gambeto? Fucking talk about them already. There's quite a few present in this level, and it might be the level with the most unique enemies, but I could be wrong about that. This level features these strangely designed magician characters who look like they might be straight out of a Tim Burton flick or something. Not to mention the way that these guys kind of just squirm towards the player. Definitely a bit of an uneasy feeling with these guys. This level introduces a largely new mechanic and a kind of annoying one, if I'm being honest. The level being titled Mirror Mansion is housed with mirrors like any theme park attraction would have, where it usually is hard to find your way out. The gimmick with this level specifically is most of the foreground is blocked and the player must utilize the the mirrors on the opposite walls, and even on the floor at one point to navigate the level. While this is a bit hard to get the hang of at first, it becomes pretty necessary to nail, as there are large segments of the level where you can only see where you're going in the mirror world. This was also a way to introduce a unique enemy in which it only shows up in the mirrors. These enemies are known as the witches, and they won't appear right in front of Wario, but will only appear in the mirror behind him, so the player must locate the witch before fighting it. It's a pretty unique game mechanic, and while it's not super original, it's done pretty well here. As for if I find the witch particularly creepy, probably not by design so much. I think they could have made her a little bit creepier here, but the mechanic of only being able to see her in the mirror does remind me of the Bloody Mary urban legend, which has always creeped me out a little bit. The midway boss in the Mirror Mansion is also the stuff of nightmares, as it is a large 3-piece painting set that has 2 arms and a face. I don't really have to explain what makes this one creepy, right? As the face clearly says everything. Not to mention, if you try to run up and hit it, it will dart away from the player, making it invulnerable to regular attacks. Much like the Snowfish, you'll have to utilize the Barrel Boys to hit and defeat this boss, and he's not super difficult as the hands don't pose a large threat, but rolling up on this homeboy without knowing he's there can definitely creep some players out, and it definitely did for me when I was a kid. The level itself isn't super long, and there's some areas that can take a bit of patience to get through, but once you master the reverse controls of the mirror segment, you're well on your way to fight the level's boss. The boss of Mirror Mansion is known as Mean MC, and much like the Clown Around boss fight, the area this boss fight takes place in is in a sold of colors on the eyes. MC himself is kind of creepy in design, looking like the worst reject Simpson character of all time. Like one of the animators spent 2 weeks working on this character for the show and never got the memo that the characters were all yellow in the show, so he had to be scrapped, and Nintendo later found it and was like, fuck it, we're gonna use this guy, Wario's fighting him. That's what I like to think happened, but regardless of the sickly looking Homer Simpson, the boss fight is actually pretty simple. The main gimmick here is a sleight of hand cup game that you might get got with onto some street in New Orleans or something. One thing the game doesn't explain is if you get the right answer, you have to hit the cup again to get MC to drop out of it, and I didn't know this for way too long into the battle. Once you have correctly guessed the cup MC is hiding in, it's time to put the smack down on him. You rinse and repeat this 5 times and you're out of there, buddy. The timing of the cup switching does get faster as you move further into the boss battle, but if you've ever played one of those item minigames from Mario Party, you should be fine at this boss battle. With MC put away forever, it's time to move on to the final level in the game, Pecan Sands. Pecan Sands is a final level of the game, and I have to commend the developers on this one. Most developers would have probably stuck the sand world as the second level in the game, but they saved it for the last. That's nice, that's different, I love it. I'm not usually a fan of the sand levels in video games, but this one actually isn't too bad. You're scaling a pyramid the entire time, collecting treasures along the way, and it's honestly pretty hard to miss a lot of them. The level does introduce some new basic enemy visual variants in the way of mummified corpses of the enemies you fought thus far. One enemy that unnerves me more than it probably should is the giant floating jellyfish, which the game deems as a laser jigglefish. I absolutely hate jellyfish in real life. I'd rather run into anything else besides a jellyfish in the water. Doesn't matter the size either, they could be the little small fucks. I don't know, they just seem so alien to me, and the idea of getting stung to death is terrifying to me. I know most jellyfish can't sting you to death, but I've never been more afraid than when I'm floating in the ocean and one of those translucent fucks barely shows up in front of me before sinking down lower, deeper, disappearing into the murky water. So for me, the laser jigglefish unnerves me quite a bit, not only because it's a jellyfish that's able to live on land, but also because of this giant eye that is only surfaced after it shoots this giant laser at Wario. This guy seems like some eldritch shit you'd see referenced in Kirby or something, man. Not only that, but the level's midway boss is just strange to say the least. It is this large stone totem pole like statue thing. The design of the statue is very odd, sporting things like noses and mouths along the sides of the 3-tiered statue. The statue has weak spots on each of the tiers to take it down, but it's constantly shifting its parts around like a Rubik's Cube of some sort, so this guy can be kind of a headache, especially since there's one blocking the only way to get to the boss. Overall, Pecan Sands definitely isn't the worst level in the game, and I think it serves as a pretty good final level, not only in difficulty but theming and design-wise. Hell, the level is so far evolved in difficulty it even included the Sandworm, which was level 2's boss, but just as a regular enemy. This would become a norm in games later down the line, most famously in Souls-like games, but to see this back in the day was kind of wild. A pretty wild concept for a kid to grasp, especially back then. Once you've scaled the pyramid, you now face off against Pecan Sands' boss, known as Ironsider, or Ironsider. I have to say, for being one of the final bosses in the game, this guy is kind of a joke. I like his design. It is pretty similar to the iRock boss battle from Super Mario 64. You have to knock out his hands in order to attack this guy, as much like Red Brief J. Normal attacks won't do anything to Ironsider. The boss doesn't evolve much throughout and has a pretty easy repetitive moveset, so he's definitely not last level boss worthy in my opinion. I think if they went a bit bigger with the boss, maybe making it a whole chessboard or something with several pieces you can fight, it might have seemed a bit more fleshed out. Regardless, with him out of the way, it's time to move on to the last boss before the Black Jewel, known as Captain Skull. Captain Skull is a pretty unique boss battle from the rest of the bosses in the game, as he has one of the most involved boss battles and one of the biggest areas to fight him in. This is because this guy's main gimmick is to hop between these ships like Clown Around did, but he is much more devastating if the player doesn't escape with him. This is sometimes really quick too, as Captain is equipped with a grappling hook for quick exits. The basic idea in the boss battle is the first part of the fight is to just dodge his bombs and kick his ass, but after a while he becomes invulnerable to regular attacks and you have to wait for him to shoot his bombs to the other side of the stage, toss back to him, knocking him out. The overall boss battle, while pretty involved, just takes a while to do, and it really isn't all that challenging at the end of the day. As for Captain Skull himself, I'd say he's actually one of the more down-to-earth characters and bosses, as I could see him maybe appearing even in a Paper Mario game or something like that. He's definitely not as strange as many of the other bosses we've talked about thus far, but he does serve as a good penultimate boss for the game. With Captain Skull dealt with, Wario obtains the final key. It is finally time to open the giant chest in the hub world. What will await Wario inside? I bet I can guess. Once Wario exits the fourth world and returns to the giant chest in the main area, things get pretty devastating pretty quickly. The chest opens, revealing that the evil Black Jewel was inside the whole time. Who would have guessed? The creature quickly flashes Wario in the eyes, sending him back to the main area before a cutscene where the Black Jewel destroys the surrounding world you just spent the whole game running around in. All of those places and the things you did throughout the game just wiped away in a single moment. All those creatures, everything you left behind, gone. Blood really wanted to be Thanos in this bitch. The jewel then makes a floating arena in which you have to fight floating above the clouds high in the sky as the rest of the game is careening back down to Earth or something. Regardless of how sudden all of this is, I think it's effective for making the final boss seem as badass as they've been making it out to be. The arena itself is also pretty intimidating, and if you don't think so, let's just take a look back at Super Mario Sunshine's final boss arena. Yeah, bathtub, right, yeah, okay. The final boss battle, while pretty challenging, is really boring and repetitive, honestly. It just sucks, and the devs even knew this, as it was actually altered with there being a second half to the battle in the Japanese version. This was due to the game being released significantly later in Japan, and the developers wanted to address the issues with the final boss, even going as far to add a cracking effect on the jewel to let players know they're actually doing damage to it throughout the battle. The main way players attack the jewel is by freeing the mini spritlings littering the arena, and after freeing all of them, the jewel will become more vulnerable. The Black Jewel has a total of 7 hits you have to get off on it, and by the 7th one, you're bored out of your fucking mind, unless you're playing the Japanese version, apparently. I will say that I've always been a huge fan of the Black Jewel's design, even if it is a deep purple and not black at all, but I'll let that one slide. Much like the Jigglefish enemy mentioned earlier, there's just something about the Cyclops one eye thing that will always unnerve me in video games. This was a really good character design for the final boss, because throughout the game you get the sense that the jewel is very powerful, creating a bunch of the strange things you encounter throughout your adventure. But when you get there, it's just a boring rinse and repeat boss battle. It's a real shame and a really bad way to end the game, but at least it was somewhat mended in the Japanese release. Upon defeating the Black Jewel, the game pretty abruptly ends and Wario's met with the mini spritlings he saved along the adventure. Depending on how many you got in your adventure will correspond with how well Wario's castle has ended up being rebuilt, which is what was promised from the little fellers for Wario freeing them throughout the game. There's several levels to this, and it's similar to the treasure mechanic in Luigi's Mansion, where depending on how much cash you collected in that game along the way would result in the mansion grade you got. It is a bit strange just based on how many spritlings you saved in this game though, and not how much money or treasure you collected along the way. I feel like that would have fit more for a Wario game, but who knows, maybe it would have gone against Wario's personality for him to rebuild his castle with his own funds. I mean, I think I got like 6k throughout my playthrough. That's not gonna rebuild shit anyway. With that, Wario is sat in whatever level castle you were able to obtain. For this video, I got 100% for the game, so my boy's living a life of luxury right now. I think this man's been through enough, wouldn't you agree? I think he deserves to live a little bit on the high life, you know? Well, that's the end of Wario World, but I still want to mention some things that I never brought up through the video, like the music, for example. I couldn't really find a good place to mention it throughout, but the music in the game, while it's not on the Donkey Kong Country levels of good, it definitely fits the game's theming and the main character, Wario. A lot of the tracks have a lot of grime on them, also mimicking the gross nature of Wario. The use of things like tubas to mimic the sound of farting in some tracks really makes this feel like Wario's anthem. A few tracks stand out for different reasons, like the pause music, which is an upbeat rhythm, but is quickly ruined by Wario screeching in the background. Tell this guy to stop ad-libbing in the stew, dude. He sucks. Or how about the obvious hip-hop influence the music in the game has? Several tracks, including the main hub world music, features funkier backing tracks and even some vocals that wouldn't have been expected in a game like this, but are definitely welcome and fit greatly here. Not all the music in the game is great, obviously, and some of the tracks are forgettable, but when the music needs to make a moment work, it definitely delivers in this game. Overall, I really love Wario World as a game, but when the game released, it got pretty middling review ratings, with many journalists complaining that the game's length wasn't worth the entry price, and that the game was too easy. While I can definitely see these complaints, and I have some of my own, like how repetitive the game is, I think the game is pretty special as it serves as a time in which Nintendo was not only trying to branch out the Mario universe with risky games like this and Luigi's Mansion, but had a lot of creativity behind it while doing it. There's a lot to be said about the negatives of the game, and yeah, maybe that adds up to a 6 or a 7 out of 10, but if I equip my nostalgia goggles right quick, I can tell you something, the game is much more to me. It is a reminder that sometimes it's okay to try some new shit and break out of your comfort zone of formatting and just throw some shit at the wall to see if it sticks. In the case of Wario World though, it didn't really stick, as there's other games in the Wario franchise that kept on going and are even still alive nowadays, leaving Wario World as a one-of-a-kind stuck on the Nintendo Gamecube. Let me know what you guys thought of the game down below in the comments. I do assume most people actively seeking out Wario World content in 2024 probably actively liked the game or liked it growing up, so let's all revel in some good nostalgia in the comments, alright? Or hey, even if you hate the game, let me know that too. I want all perspectives here. Looking back on Wario World and playing back through it, I have no problem calling this one of Nintendo's strangest games they've ever made. Maybe not on the same weirdness scale as a Chibi Robo or something, but in terms of a mainline Mario universe game, this is as weird as it gets, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Please leave a like or let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the video. I have no idea how this turned out at the time of recording this, but I do hope the project turned out decent, as this is a bit of newer territory for me in terms of formatting a video. I've never really done a retrospective before, so let me know what I could change differently. Should I have covered the full entire game like this? I don't know. I'm looking at an hour and 20 on my recording here. This seems like a big project, so maybe I'll cut it down in the future, or if you guys like the longer stuff, let me know that too. I plan to do more videos like this in the future, probably doing Donkey Kong 64 at some point, but if you want me to do a deeper dive on games as a more regular thing on the channel, let me know down below. I want to talk about some eerie stuff from my childhood with these old ass video games, so I'm down to do that more if you guys want to see it more. As always, thanks for watching and all the positive comments recently. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Peace.